Okay, you better believe it. The Monday night shir is actually happening Monday night. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dvaro. Okay, so it's Parshas Korach. We've had a number of shiurim in Korach over the past couple of years. Tonight's topic is something that I've mentioned on Shabbos afternoons here and there. And it's a wonderful topic related to Parshas Korach and Gilgulim. But when I was looking into it, I thought, how about before we get into the Korach part of it, we have a bit of an introduction about Gilgulim. And then with Abish's help, we were able to collect quite a few sources about Gilgulim to the point that we may actually only have time for the introduction. You may have to stay overtime if you want to hear the connection to Korach. Of course, everyone can leave whenever you desire. Would love to have you stick around till the end. So on the one hand, it's a Korach topic because the Arizal really illuminates the whole story with the Gilgul glasses. There's nothing like learning a story from Tanakh with the glasses of the Arizal and noting that certain characters that appear in any specific story, it's not the first time and not the last time they're here, and it's just another chapter out of the big book. It says in Parshas Bereshis, Zeh Sefer told us Adam. This is the book of the generations of Adam. But in Musa Sfarim it says that every person throughout their life, they write a book. Zeh Sefer told us Adam. Everyone's told us, everyone's life is a book. And just like you can't open a book to any specific page and expect to understand the events, you'll read one page and you wonder what's going on, why is this happening to that person, why did this person make such a decision, such a choice. You can't judge a book based on one page, you have to read it from the beginning. And then maybe you'll understand what's going on. And that's what it means in Pirkei Avos, you can't judge your friend until you reach his place. It means you have to go through the same journey that he went through. The same life they went through to this point, and then maybe you'll be able to understand. But because we don't go through that journey, al tadin es chaverich, you can't judge your friend. You don't know where he is. It's not just where he is now, but how he got there. There's a book, Sefer told us Adam. Well, that's in Musar. In Kabbalah, we take the same idea, the same sentiment, and stretch it a step further. Your entire life that we live may itself only be one chapter of a bigger book. There's a before and there's an after. Somebody once asked the Rebbe, why do we even know about Gilgulim, about reincarnation? And the Rebbe responded that a person in their life may go through things, it just doesn't add up. And you say, God, you asked me to do ABC, and then you promised you'll take care of me X, Y, Z. And it's just not stacking up. Things are happening to me, shouldn't be happening. And one can reach a stage of Yush and think that there's no real judgment in heaven. Like, what's going on? So the fact that we know that there's a much bigger story than what we see now, so the Rebbe says it's a comfort. Knowing that there's an idea of reincarnation is somewhat of a comfort. So there's much more going on. There's no way we can expect to understand. Even knowing our own current life, I know what I did from when I was a baby till this point, it's still only a chapter in the greater book. How can we expect to fully understand? So it's somewhat of a consolation. Anyhow, we're going to see that Gilgulim, of course, is not unanimous. And we begin with number one. Let's get right into it. In number one, actually, before we get right into it, you see that this whole thing's an introduction. The introduction has become so lengthy, it itself needs an introduction. There's so much intrigue and mystery, and we're baffled about what happens after the soul leaves the body, right? What happens after, you call it Misa, but Misa's death is a very somber term. After the soul departs from the body, right? The soul, your hope goes to a better place, as they say. There's so much intrigue. Of course, you have the atheists who say, well, nothing happens, right? But of course, for the Ma'aminim, it's very intriguing to know what happens. Where does the soul go? What happens to the neshama? What happens to the guf? It kind of relates to last week's topic about going to the cave of a tzaddik and talking, communing with someone who has already passed away, communing with the soul. Does part of the soul hang around over the kever? Is the soul in Gan Eden? There's a whole fascinating element which is unbelievable, and none of you actually will believe it. But nonetheless, there was the great Maharshal, right? The great Maharshal of Lublin. He had a great student by the name of the Matei Moshe, okay? The author of the Matei Moshe, a halachic work. His name is Rab Moshe, last name is Meis, Mem Sof, Meis. Meis, how can you have a last name Meis? So some pronounce it Mas, Mos. Some say Meis is a Rosh Tevis. He was a Marbitz Torah, a Machzik Torah. So it was a... Now others, they wouldn't write his name Moshe Meis. They would write Moshe Chai, Moshe Ish Chai. However, I found in an interesting book an old documented story that back in the day, it was not uncommon for dead souls to gather together in the middle of the night in the shul. And not just that, but to make a minyan. And sometimes they wanted living people to join them. So if you were righteous enough and worthy enough, you would hear, Ya'amoid, you would hear your name being called up. And one night, in the middle of the night, this Reb Moshe, one of the greatest students of the Maharshal, gets a message that he's being called up to an Ali in the shul with a bunch of mason, bunch of dead spirits. He donned his talus. I don't know about tefillin, but he went to the shul and he made a birchas HaTorah, and he learned from Parshas Achreimus, the parsha about Arayas, about forbidden relations. It was him and a whole room full of dead souls. Okay, so well, so there's much mystery about what exactly happens to the soul. So this takes us to the question of the Gilgul of reincarnation, transmigration, as a doctor would be more familiar with. Transmigration, when the soul leaves the body and yet it returns back again. It returns back again. This is an idea which exists very much outside of Yiddishkeit. There are many in religions of India particularly. Buddhism and Hinduism and some of the other isms, some of the other religions over there in India. Gilgul is not only important and crucial, but for some of them it's pivotal. It's literally one of the ikrim. Every life has to be understood in the fact that your soul's been here before, it's coming back. Even in Yiddishkeit amongst Chassidim that we believe in it, but it's not something we speak about every day. But in some of these religions in India, it's literally a pinas yesod, it's a cornerstone of the faith of their religion. In Christianity, there were many that abhorred it and felt that it was kfirah, heresy, to believe the soul returns. In the early Greek philosophers, well, you know what, why should I spoil it for you? Join me in the Abarbanel in number 1. This is a comment of the Abarbanel in Parshas Kiseitze, where it speaks about Yibum. And the Abarbanel discusses how the Yibum story, 2 brothers, right, Reuven and Shimon, Reuven's married to Shprinze, and Nebuch Reuven passes away without kids, so his brother Shimon has a mitzvah, levirate marriage, Yibum, to marry Shprinze. And the pasuk says that this child, Yakum, this child literally will continue the legacy of the one that passed away. And the Abarbanel says there's no way to understand this mitzvah and understand the meaning of the pasuk without the doctrine of reincarnation, of transmigration, of Gilgulim, that it means that Reuven, who had passed away, his soul comes back in the new baby. In fact, in Parshas Vayeshev by Er Va'onan, Both of them lose their lives to the hand of heaven. They die in Misa B'dei Shamayim for the sin of Zerel Atol, of wasting seed. Why did Er waste his seed with his wife Tamar? He didn't want her to conceive because it might play with her beauty. Right? He wants her to be untouched. But by Oinen, the pasuk says that Oinen knew ki loy yiazar. Oinen knew that if he had a child, it wouldn't be his. What does that mean? It means that the child, not just figuratively, would be carrying on the legacy of his brother, but literally it's the soul of his brother. It's literally his brother coming back. So the Abarbanel is very clear. He's not the first one, and we'll get to that soon. But the Abarbanel has a long piece there about this, and he says in number 1, Va'atzmu harayas hatoiriyos, the Toradika proofs are powerful, shemotzu hamukubolim b'ksuvim alzeh, that the Mukubolim found in the Psukim about this. There are many statements of the rabbis that teach the idea of reincarnation as well. So the Kabbalists found rayas in Tanakh. There are statements from Chazal. The words of Eliki Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Otzmu Misaper. You go through the Zohar, there's so much in the Zohar about it. What can I add laharich barayas? The story of Yehuda and to Yehuda's kids with Tamar Yechichel will prove. Umitzvahs haTorah beyibum ha'ach. These are the proofs, the two things we mentioned. Yehuda's kids, the story of Yibum, and there's Bali Safek, there are many. V'gam kadmoinei hafilosofim kein hoyadaitam. The early philosophers, this was their das. Who is he referring to? Tirazem edivrei Socrates, ha'eloki. Socrates, the godly one. Sha'amar b'shas misasa, he said as he was dying, I'm not afraid, I'm coming back. K'meshakasav b'shmoi Platon, Plato writes in his book Nitzchis HaNefesh that he made, which is called Phaedon in Greek. From the words that Socrates said to his students when the Bezdin was geyser for him to be killed in Athens. So Socrates is a big proponent for Gilgulim. Pythagoras, Pythagoras, Gamken, Pythagoras, even but Pythagoras is before Socrates. The Shar HaKadmoinim and other early scholars, Zeh Hoyadaitam, this is what they believed. So Plato seems to believe it. He quotes in the name of his Rebbe Socrates, and before them, Pythagoras. So here you're talking already, Pythagoras is at the end of the first Beis HaMikdash. Ulai, he says, maybe kiblu ma'adoris harishayim, maybe they themselves. See, in the Welt, usually Pythagoras is considered like the father of the idea of Gilgulim. He was, even Aristotle talks about him, he was like a Rebbe. Pythagoras is known for his, A squared plus B squared is C squared, right? But he was, there's lots of stories they said about him, mamish spiritual stories, and mafsim and ruach hakodesh, and he was like a rebbe. Well, over here you have the Abarbanel saying Pythagoras is almost like the first documented Greek scholar pushing the idea of Gilgulim. But he says, Ulai kiblu ma'adoris Hashem. It could be it goes back much earlier to earlier generations. Umizman anavim. Va'amnam, however, Aristotle took his own path in this theory of Gilgulim u'mefarshei Sfarav, and those that follow Aristotle and explain his words. Minu ma'oid, that they refuse, they reject this, and they believe that Gilgul hanafashis is something which is impossible. The gam chachmei hanutzrim kulam, he says also the Christian, says the Abarbanel, the Sefer l'kusim borchum edasas, in their religious books, the Christians they also flee from this. Until, because of their hesitation or their rejection, they don't, when it comes to Yibum or by the story of the Torah, they don't speak about Gilgulim at all because they don't buy into it. So you have the Abarbanel setting it up. The Christians very much reject it. The Greek philosophers believed it. And like we mentioned, it's very much found in religions in India. What's fascinating is that Pythagoras gets credited not only by the Barbanel, by some of the greatest Yiddish Sforim. When they speak about Gilgulim, they say, you know who we rely on this? Who are we supported by? By Pythagoras. You wouldn't believe it. But look at number 2 on the side, the Charedim. So the Charedim, okay, is just after the Abarbanel passes away in 1508. The Charedim is living throughout the 1500s. So he's just after the Abarbanel. But look what he writes in number 2. V'yesh l'chol yorei Hashem. Anyone who fears God should place to his heart to fulfill all the mitzvahs, lishtadl, to fulfill every mitzvah that he's able to. Because kashem sha'adam chayzer begilgul, just like a person returns in Gilgul, we're in the second line of number 2. Kishhirshia, when he's wicked, v'hisiv, and commits abominations, alila. So one reason why someone might return is because they messed up big time. And God gives you a chance to come back and make it right. But there's another dimension. Even at Tzaddik Gomer Chayzer Begilgul, Al Kol Mitzvah that he was able to fulfill V'loi Kima. There's another aspect, not when you messed up, but you missed out on opportunity. A neshama may come back to Chaparain, a mitzvah opportunity that it didn't fulfill for whatever reason in previous lifetime. Like it's found in the Zohar in numerous places. And Pythagoras agrees to it too. Jump to number 4 for a second. The Alshich, the great Alshich, so he's the same time as the Charedim in Tzvas. And the Alshich is in Parshas in Tazri about the Tzaras. And he says, if you have a Baheres Lavana, the white blotch, Omek Einmar, it's not deeper than the skin. He says what that means is if it's deeper than the if it appears deeper than the skin, it means that the tomb of the Tzaras is seeped in. It's seeped in deep. What does it mean it's not deeper than the skin? That its strength was not powerful enough to spread around Likonis and to enter into the body. Then the kohen will quarantine the fellow. What that means is sheyaskiras hanefesh. It means when the soul, after a person passes away, the nefesh gets quarantined. You know what it means for a soul to get quarantined? It means you get sent back to another body. It means reincarnation. Benega ashmasa, because if it's sin, toichoim achar, another body. Ki yiviyenu begilgul, comment to Gilgul, kadas, Pythagoras. The Alshich again, Pythagoras. Look at number 5. The Reishis Chachma, Rebelio Dividas, also Tzfas, 1500s. In number 5, it's in the gates of fear in the Reishis Chachma. In Per Yud Gimel, Oid Tzorich Lira, one needs to be afraid. Memunas HaGilgul, one, you should take Gilgul seriously. If you mess up now, you're coming back to rectify it. It's like some Meforshim on Pirkei Avos when it says, Ba'al Korach Tochai, against your will you live. What do you mean? What do you mean against my will I'll live? I'll jump off a bridge, God forbid. I could take my life. Who's stopping me? No, you're coming back. You take your life, you'll just be reborn again. That's what it means, against your will you'll live. Suicide ain't gonna cut it, you're coming right back. Anyhow, he says, look what he says in brackets, Shohairuna Razal, the Chazal have taught this to us. The Hiski Mimon Pythagoras. And Pythagoras is on board. Although Sherabu Acholkim B'Deyazu. The Reishis Chachma concedes many disagree. So you have the Reishis Chachma quoting Pythagoras, the Alshich, the Charedim, the Abarbanel. Like, what's going on over here? Like, what? They're all quoting this guy. I mean, it's full in the Zohar. The Zohar is not good enough. You have to go back to Pythagoras. But apparently, Pythagoras must have been a Mechasidei Umas Ha'olam. And although Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes in one of his works that, the Gilgulim of the Zohar is not exactly the same as the Gilgul of Pythagoras. Generally it's similar, but in Kabbalah it's much more nuanced. And he says, Bechlal, the Goyim, even when they seem to hit it on the head, it's very different than the way we look at things. And Rabbi Yaakov Emden actually writes something sharp. He says there are those that go around saying, hey, the mysticism of Yiddishkeit and of Christianity and of Islam, the mysticism really is all very similar. It all boils down to the same foundations. We all believe in the same The Kabbalah, the Mitzvah is almost all the same. And Rabbi Yaakov even says he knows there are people that do that, and when they do this, because they don't know what they're talking about, they don't truly understand the nuances of Yiddish Kabbalah that generally looks the same. But when with the nuance, it's a different world completely. And he says even about the Gilgulim of Pythagoras, generally it's the same, but it's not. It's a lot more intricate, nuanced, and much more perfect. The way obviously it's in Kabbalah. But it's just interesting how they're all reaching out to say, hey, we have Pythagoras supporting us. Just continue in number 5. Look what the Reishis Chachma says. And none of these are random Sfarim. These are basic, the Alshich, the Charedim, but these are all Sfarim that nobody questions. The Reishis Chachma was, the Alter Rebbe wanted his Chassidim to all be versed in Reishis Chachma. But look what he says in the 3rd line of number 5. Now, why should one think about the fact that there may be Gilgulim in the future, or I may be. It's very bitter l'neshama yoyser medina shel Gehenim. That's what he says. He says a Gilgul is more severe for the soul than Gehenim. The Ramban says in Gehenim that the fire in earth is only 1/60th of the fire in Gehenim. And it's how bad could Gilgul be? I live in Miami Beach, I have a nice house, I have a couple cars, I have a restaurant many restaurants down the road, business is good, the family is good, everyone's healthy. Life isn't that bad. How can you say if someone's life is horrible, they're living through the Holocaust, so then maybe you could say that such a life is worse than Gehenna, maybe. But he says a blanket statement. So the vort is that even if you're living in Miami Beach and you have a beautiful home on the water, life is good for the body. Life is good for the goof. You have a beautiful car, that's good for the goof. You have a whole fridge full of cold seltzers, that's good for the goof. The neshama is in pain. And when the neshama, that's the only comfort the neshama perhaps has, the shiurim. Unless the neshama is really suffering.
How do you know that this Gilgul is not the improvement of the previous?
Right. Nonetheless, when a soul is in heaven and the soul is told you're coming back down to live, it's worse news for the soul than had it been told you're going to Gehenna. Now, there's another thing, that a person's lifespan, you live to 120 hopefully. Gehenna, 11 months top, 12 months, and hopefully could be much, much less. So there's also, just taking that in consideration, the neshama might just want to get it over and done with. Anyhow, Al Kaponim continues the Reishis. We're not done. The 4th line. The Kosav Meiri Olav Shalom. My master Olav Shalom writes. Now, who's his teacher? He learned by the Ramak, Reb Moshe Cordovero. The Reishis Chachma is a contemporary of the Arizal. He was the Reishis Chachma. Reb Eliyahu was a student of the Ramak. But he also learned by some of the other scholars there in Tzfas. So I don't know who he's quoting. Maybe it's Ramak. But he says a mashal to a person, shaholach b'schayre. A guy went on a trip with business. Mahalach shnosayim, 2 years, 3 years, lamakam ploni. So a guy goes across the world, a long, long trip. And he's bringing a ton of merchandise with him. He is certain that he's going to make a killing. Will make a profit. When he reaches there, they tell him, all of this was a waste of time. Because the schayra that you brought, the merchandise you brought, is worthless, it's valueless here. You wasted 3 years of your life and many hopes and dreams. You brought the wrong stuff. The ani goes back devastated. La'acher. He goes back. How much pain reaches this person? Now, the problem is he was negligent. Maybe he should have done his homework before he went to find out. Al miyut chachmasu tvanasi. He says, what was going on in the guy's mind? Why didn't he investigate to determine what actually would work? What the new populace 3 years travel away would appreciate. That's the mashal that the Reishis Chachma's Rebbe said. In other words, a person can spend their whole lives gathering possessions, gathering money. You have a huge bank account, billions of dollars in the bank account. And when you go upstairs, they say, this isn't currency over here. You brought the wrong stuff. You brought the wrong stuff. V'animshul movin me'elav, he says, the nimshul's obvious. Ubefrat kasha yeda. If most of the souls these days are not new, this is the Reish Chochmah saying this 500 years ago. Most of the souls these days are reincarnations. This isn't our first time around, so we're here to rectify. We're here to make up, to make it right what we did in the first time around. And if we don't end up getting busy with good stuff, now how do you know what you're supposed to rectify? Maybe we'll talk about that. Simply you don't. So you just do the best you can in everything. You be the best yid that you could be. Ben Adam lamokim, ben Adam lachaverei. You toil and you work to be the best person you're able to be. And then hopefully you'll hit the nail on the head. And even if not, God can't have any kindness to you because you did a good job. You did a good general job. But if you get lost persevering and pursuing after other gashmistic pleasures and interests, if you leave the world without fixing what you came for, the whole trip was for naught. And then you're going to come back a third time and a fourth time until you make it up. And and then you have to do more makeup. It's like when you pay a fine, the later you pay it, the more you pay. The Anshe Gadol al Shaloi Tikkun B'Tchila. The Eibishter has a taina to you. What happened? I sent you back to make it up, and again you messed up. So the Reish Chochmah is saying you gotta keep this. He said, Tzarich later, person, you study about Gilgulim, it's not just for cute tidbits of the Arizal. This person's a Gilgul of somebody else and answers a question in a story. No. It's something to live with. Because it keeps a person on the straight and narrow, keeps us focused. It keeps a person focused. So you have all these Sfarim pro Gilgul. Before we see the naysayers, join me number 3. The Sefer Charedim has a story. He has a story. Umaisa Haya B'Kastil, a story happened in Kastil, number 3. Shahaya Mezumin La'ovdei Kechavim, the Goyim had a shur, they had an ox, Lischek, they were going to bullfighting. K'moi Shein Regilin, like their custom, Lahakas Boy, to hit the ox, Lanoisayin, to harass it, to have sport with the ox. On Ba'oisa Hayoim Balaylahu, the night before the day of the ox fighting, the bullfighting, Ba'al Adam Echad, Yehudi B'chaloim, V'ro Aviv, the guy sees his father in a dream. V'amaloi, the father already passed away. So he tells his son, Dabri, no, my child. After I died, I was Nizgalgul, but not in a person, in a shur, in an ox. We're going to see the Kabbalists speak at length that reincarnation is not only of the soul into another human body, or into another Jew, it could be into a Goyish body, it could even be into an animal. Listen to the story, what happened. And he says, I was placed, my soul, or we'll see part of the soul, was placed into an ox. And I am that ox that is destined for the bullfighting tomorrow. For affliction, caution, for awful pain. For the sport of the populace. So therefore, my child, please redeem me. Allow me that I should flee derech mokum ploini. Allow me to flee, break me out, basically. Break the fence, get me out of there late tonight. Before they kill me, before they tear me apart. Va'ato tifdeni, and you should redeem me. So now it sounds like you should buy me out. Buy me out. But before he said, allow me to be bareach. Now he says, be paid to me, which means pay them off. Pay whatever they ask. And shech this ox. Make sure it's a good shchita, and it should be eaten by poor people who study Torah. This is what I was told from heaven. the father tells the son. And I was allowed to tell you, because usually when the souls in the next world become privy to information, they don't know. They usually don't have permission to reveal it to those that are alive. It's a big thing to have reshus to reveal it. And when this happens, my soul will be able to be chayzer b'mayla. I'll be able to leave a Gilgul of Behema, the Gilgul Adam. Then I'm still not off the hook. I got a lot to do, but at least then I'll be able to come be Gilgul Adam. The Ezke, and when I'm a person, I can actually serve God while I'm here. Now says the Charedim, Umaisim ko'ele rabim iru b'Yisrael. So many of these stories happened. Sha'al avicha v'yageidcha zekenecha v'yom. Ask your father, ask your Zayda. There are tons of these stories. Tons of these stories. Okay, right. So what do we have so far? We have in the 1500s some of the biggest names. The Reishis Chochma was a Kabbalist. Okay. Makes sense, he believes in Gilgul very much. It's a big thing. It's a big thing in Kabbalah, as we'll see. The Al-Shich, okay, he was more in Drush. As the Arizal told him, his neshama was shaykh to Drush. But he obviously must have had a bit of a yad in Kabbalah. And he's living in Tzfas amongst the Kabbalists, so of course you're going to believe it, right? The Charedim as well. The Abarbanel is a little bit of a chiddush, because Abarbanel was a philosopher. The Abarbanel attests to the fact he didn't learn Kabbalah, and it sounds like he's lamenting the fact he didn't have teachers who taught Kabbalah. 1400s in Spain, I mean, yeah, obviously had some Kabbalists, they were few and far between. The main thing was philosophy. He learned by philosophers. And he became a great choker himself. But he does quote the Zohar, and he does refer to the Kabbalah, the Chachmei Kabbalah's Chachmei Emes, the scholars of truth. And so on the one hand, he's a philosopher first and foremost. On the other hand, he had a tremendous appreciation for Kabbalah. So, and as you see here, that he embraced the idea of Gilgulim. So, who were the naysayers? Okay. In number 6, we have Rav Sadia Gaon. Rav Sadia Gaon. Rav Sadia Gaon passes away in 942 at the age of 50 or 60. We've spoken about the discrepancy in the past. We'll have a shir at some point about Rav Sadia Gaon. He definitely deserves one. And in his Sefer Emunas V'Deis, now Rav Sadia Gaon, we have a commentary on Sefer Yetzirah, one of the early Kabbalistic works, one of the earliest Kabbalistic works. There's a commentary from Rav Sadia Gaon. Now there is discussion if he wrote it, if it's from somebody else, if he wrote the whole thing, but it carries his name, and many quote it in his name. So he would have had a hand in Kabbalah if that's the case. And yet, in his book, Emunas V'Deis, he comes out as a very strict philosopher, a rationalist, everything has to make sense, to the point that in number 6 he writes, V'hineni Omer, I'll tell you, Anoshim, there are people, Mimish Nikram Yehudim, there are people from those that are called Jews. I have found them believing in Gilgul, and they call it Ha-Tarkos, the reincarnation, reimplanting. Rav Sadia Gaon wrote this in Arabic, so this isn't his actual words, it's a translation. But he says, "Ve'inyoner l'dai tom." You know what they believe? The spirit of Reuven comes to Shimon, and then afterwards in Levi, and then Yehuda. Some of them, or many of them, believe that sometimes a ruach of a man can come into an animal, and the ruach of an animal into man. Right, the next time around, that comes. And many of such foolishness, narishkeit. He says it's rubbish.
Man who went into an animal.
I would assume so. Yeah, I would assume so. Otherwise, it's not really shaykh for ruach of an animal. I would assume it means if a man came to an animal and comes back to a man. So you have Rav Sadia Gaon saying it's pashut narish.
Does that become a problem when you can't cohabitate with an animal, and then you have, if the wife or the husband was a Gilgul from an animal?
Yes.
It's a problem.
It's also a problem if a woman in a previous life was a man, she won't be able to have children. The Arizal talks about that.
Today, the transgender people that can do that.
Rabbi Yosef Kaira, in his Sefer Magid Meishorim, records a whole discussion that this Magid told him that his last wife, for many, wasn't able to have kids. And the reason was because in her previous life, she was a great chacham, a huge rabbi. Didn't take the time to teach people. So the students would have been like her fruits. So now he came back as a woman, unable to have children.
Yeah.
Almost as quid pro quo for not having students in the previous life, but also because she was a zocher in the previous life. And now she's married to Rabbi Yosef Kaira, who is teaching the whole world Torah, and that's a rectification for her. But she cried so many bitter tears over being childless that she broke the system, and she was able to have kids. Yeah, Rabbi Yosef Kaira records the whole thing in a Sefer Magid Meishorim. So that's fascinating stuff. But Akaponim, Reb Sadia Gaon couldn't be any clearer. Who else? After Reb Sadia Gaon, there was a very great philosopher. His name was Reb Avraham ibn Daud, the Ravid. There were 3 Ravids alive at the same time. 2 in Provence, 1 in Spain. The 2 in Provence, you have the famous Ravid who argues on the Rambam. So he was a major Kabbalist. And his father-in-law was called Reb Avraham Av Bezdin, the Sefer HaEshkol he authored. And then you had the Ravid in Spain, Reb Avraham ibn Daud, who's famous for writing an historical work, the Seder HaKabbalah, the Sefer HaKabbalah. He also wrote a work on philosophy, Emunah Rama, exalted Emunah Rama. They say the reason why it lost its popularity, it was a great work. The problem is, shortly after he wrote his work, the Rambam wrote his Moreh Nevuchim. This is before there's any printing. Everything is manuscripts. To rewrite your own Moreh Nevuchim, hundreds of pages, it's months and months of work. If you had to choose between the Moreh Nevuchim of the Rambam or Emunah Rama of the Ravid, people chose the Moreh Nevuchim. So just because it was so hard to make manuscripts, and if you're anyways copying a philosophical sefer, the Moreh Nevuchim was more popular, so that's why there were just very few copies of the Emunah Rama available. So nobody really learned it. We do have it available today, but it's a pity. In his Sefer Emunah Rama, he completely rejects, as a philosopher, the whole notion of Gilgul. You know, he asks it in a way, it's a little complicated, he asks it in a way that, so Yankel passes away, right now you have Beryl. So you're saying Beryl carries Yankel's soul. So he says, hang on a second. Beryl has his own soul, so Beryl carries 2 souls, you have Beryl, because it's Beryl. But he also has Yankel's soul. Does a person have 2 consciousnesses? How do you say it?
Conscientious.
Can you have 2, unless you're someone schizophrenic, God forbid, someone has multiple personalities. If someone has multiple personalities, he says it can't be you have 2 souls. Elamai, you have 1, but hang on a second. The soul has to be in perfect equilibrium and harmony with the body. So, you're saying Beryl doesn't have his own soul, only has Yankel's soul. But Yankel's soul is in perfect harmony with Beryl's body. So then, the way he asked it is, but then you don't have Beryl, you have Yankel. So Yankel didn't come back as somebody else, Yankel came back as himself. That's what seems to be, it's a bit of a hard read, because it's also a translation, his work, if I'm not mistaken. But I'll upon him, what? So hold on, yeah. Well, hold on. So you have Reb Sadia Gaon, you have the Emunah Rama. The Rambam's son, Rabbi Avraham ben Avraham, is quoted, and I'll tell you later who quotes him, as dismissing the notion of Gilgulim. The Rosh in number 7 has a letter to his son. The Rosh in number 7 has a letter to his son, Rabbi Yehuda. In the letters of Rabbi Yehuda ben Horosh, right? The Rosh had a number of kids. His most famous son is Rabbi Yaakov, the Baal HaTurim, the Tur. But actually, the Tur did not succeed his father as Rabbi of Toledo. It was the Rosh's son, Rabbi Yehuda. And in the Tshuvas, I think it's letter 102, in the Zichron Yehuda, the Tshuvas of the son, And over there, the Rosh ends off his letter about Gilgulim, Im kabolo hu nekabel, ki ein tam maspik. If it's the Masorah, the tradition, I'll accept. But if you're trying to prove Gilgul based on logic, there's not enough. You can't make a logical case for it. If it's a fact, it's a fact. Okay, but if you're trying to prove it logically, no, can't do that. Who else is on the side of the questioners? The Ikrim. Rabbi Yosef Elbe, one of the greatest philosophers in medieval times. Okay, he's at the end of the Rishonim, passes away in the 1440s, so it's the end of the Rishonim. He is a student of Rab Chistoi Kreskas, the author of the Ur Hashem, who was also a naysayer against Gilgulim. But look what the Ikrim says in number 8, Mikol Mokim, the Nefesh Shekvar Shimsha Begufha Enushi. A soul, he says, a soul before it's born does not really have free will. A soul's not going to violate the will of Hashem. But once the soul's in the body, it becomes a Baal Bechira. So he says, imagine you have a nefesh that was already alive. So it became a Baal Bechira. It possessed free will while she was in a body. Then she leaves the body. The person died. Why should she come back to the body? He says, do you think that it's easier for the Eibishter to plant in the seed of the father Dafka, a soul that had already lived before, instead of a fresh soul? He says no. Ubamet toichan atipa azarius. Do you think the physical seed of the father is any more fitting and molded towards being makabel, a soul that already lived, more than being makabel, a soul that did not yet live and was not yet a Baal Bechira before? He says there's no reason to say. It's almost like once you've lived before and you've experienced free will, so when the soul leaves the body, it's easier to come back again than a fresh soul. He said it's not true. Once the soul leaves the body, it's just as removed from the body as a new soul. Although there is an idea that when someone gets judged in heaven, we have stories of people requesting in court in heaven, I don't want to be judged by a soul that never lived on planet Earth. I want to be judged by a soul that lived on Earth and knows the hardships, knows all the tests and trials and tribulations, knows that life is not a simple journey. And then there's more than that. I want to request a soul that's still alive. We have episodes of the Baal Shem Tov. While he was alive here, he was sitting on courts in Bez and Shalmaila. When often he would go in trances and his soul would go to heaven, he would sometimes sit on court cases because he knew that being that he's still alive, he's the only one that can be able to, bail that guy out, to defend him. In contrast, a soul that's already left this world, far more removed. But beyond that is a soul that never lived here. But here you have the Sefer Ikrim equating them and saying, no, once a soul was alive and left the body, it's not any easier to get that into a new body than to take a fresh soul. That's just his perspective. But then he says, what's even worse? They say that the nefashos of man come back in animals. How bizarre is that? But then he finishes off, V'Hashem Yedea, God knows. In other words, he's not writing it off completely. He's saying logically he doesn't see it. I think it's the exact same sentiment we saw in number 7. Ein tam, logically I don't see it. If it's a fact, that's the way the Eibishter made it, so then okay. It's like Gzeirus HaKosov. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. God decided. Kach olo b'machshava lefonai. Okay, if that's the way it is. But logically, he doesn't see it. But he doesn't go as far as Upsad going to say it's Bodomaisis. But you have some big people over here. It's not just a few anti-Kabbalah fellows. You have some big people of it. The Rambam's son, the Rosh question, Reb Sajikon, the Ikrim, the Raiva, the Baal Emunah Rambos from the great Rishonim. Like I mentioned, the fact we don't really know about his Sefer is not to any fault of the Sefer. It's just a matter of mazel, a matter of luck. Sometimes there are great Sfarim that just don't become popular, and there are sometimes ordinary Sfarim that just take off. The Zohar says everything is totally on mazel, afilu sefer Torah shebehechel. Meaning, you can have in the Oren HaKodesh a beautiful Sefer Torah that just never ends up getting taken out. The people that open Oren always take out the other ones. The most beautiful one just sits there. It's no fault of the Sefer Torah. It's not deliberate on just whatever. It's just mazel. It's just mazel. Anyhow. So those are from the Rishonim. We said during the 1500s, there's a whole wave. Okay, you have the wave of Kabbalah and Tzfas. Okay, the Arizal and Gilgulim we'll get to. Okay, he's the master of Gilgulim. But it seems like anyone, even the Charedim, the Alshich, the Reishis Chacham, it's all a given. The Abarbanel, it's a given. There was one fellow during the 1500s. His name was Rabbi Avraham ibn Migash. Rabbi Avraham ibn Migash. Now, the last name Ibn Migash is familiar to many of us because of Rabbi Yosef ibn Migash, who was the Rebbe of the Rambam's father, Reb Maimon. He succeeded the Rif in Lucena, in Spain, at a major yeshiva. The Rambam says, just reading that man's writings, it's frightening, it's astonishing to see how wise, how brilliant that man was. That was Rabbi Yosef ibn Migash. This Rabbi Avraham is, a couple centuries later, is apparently a descendant. And he was in Turkey, so he's a Sfardisher. But he wrote a book called Koved Elokim, The Honor of God. Fascinating book. Philosophical. And in it he has a whole piece about Gilgulim. Absolutely debunking it. From beginning to end. Debunking, refusing to believe. What's interesting is that he had a hand in Kabbalah. And although he had a hand in Kabbalah, he refuses the doctrine of Gilgulim in complete contradistinction to the Abarbanel, who didn't study Kabbalah yet believed. And it's interesting, this Rabbi Avraham ibn Migash, he has a whole section about coming into animals, and he really wants to know if someone comes as a dog. So, what consciousness do you have? Are you just a dog soul? A regular soul that a dog usually has, an animalistic soul of a dog? So then how is that this Yankel that passed away? Yankel was a human, Yankel had a neshama. Like how? So Elamai going to say it's Yankel's neshama in the dog? He knows his Yankel. He has a human mind inside the dog? Can't be. So how are you going to explain it? Anyhow, he has many challenges in the idea of Gilgulim, and he is one of the big naysayers. And in it he quotes from Rabbi Avraham, the son of the Rambam, and he says, Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam questioned it, and I follow him. At the end of the 1500s, we have our old friend, Rabbi Yehuda Arya of Modena, known as the gambling rabbi. That's what we've named him. And we mean that with the greatest honor. with no disrespect. Rabbi Yehuda Arya of Modena, we had a long class about him. That's right. When it's hot and you're on the street, you schwitz. But then he has a full beard, and we said, interesting, because other rabbis actually didn't. So he wrote a book against Kabbalah called Ari Noyim. We spoke about that. But he also wrote a book questioning Gilgulim called Ben David. And the Chidah in number 10 quotes the following. Look in number 10. The Chidah in his Shem Agdolim, in his entry for Rabbi Yehuda Arya of Modena, quotes a story. I saw in the book of Chai Yehuda in a manuscript to the rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda Arya speaks about his life, etc. I want to write one thing, says the Chidah. The rabbi says, B'tchila, he didn't believe in reincarnation. And something happened that his neighbor, Yolda Ben, ukimat b'soy chodesh l'leidosoi, chola hayeled b'chaloim koshim shoinim. The neighbor had a child, and I'll read it outside. One day, one night, Rabbi Yehuda gets a knock on the door. It's this neighbor. And she says, come, say some psukim, come say some words of Torah. This was a minig of the rabbis in Italy. Bring some spirituality, maybe you'll help the child. The child needs some physical help. And he went and he sees the child, and the child opened his eyes, 6 months old, and says, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And with that, the child's soul went, and it was a pella. From that day onwards, he began to believe in reincarnation because his eyes saw. How could it be a 6 months old was able to speak like an adult in a loud voice, to say the pasuk of Shema, the whole thing in a loud voice? It must be that soul had been here once before. There's no other way to explain it. Ad kan dvorav sheleisi b'ksav yad b'sefer nishri. Says I saw this in manuscript. In the sefer that we have today from the Chaya Yehuda, which is the autobiography of Yehuda Ari of Modena, it's not there. It's not there. And I saw, these a modern scholar, right? Modern scholarship is just so much like modern art. You close your eyes and you just spray. Anyhow, this guy wants to say that the Chidor was incorrect. The story never happened. And I said, that's a big allegation. The Chidor is incorrect. What evidence do you have? So he writes, what his evidence is? Because it doesn't make sense. It just can't be. It just can't be. He says the Chidor was gullible. But me, I'm doch a sophisticated rationalist. I know it didn't happen. Was I there? No, I wasn't there. Do I have any evidence? Well, in the version we have, it's not there. Can't be. This doesn't make sense that it happened. The Chidor fell for it, and whoever else quotes it fell for it. They're all gullible. But ich bin der größer, I'm the sophisticated, I'm the aufgeklärte, with such scholars, who needs fools? Anyhow, so that really bothered me. I probably mentioned it before, it really bothered me. But upon him, this Rav Yehuda Ari of Modena, we had a long class about him, the rabbi who lost his money in the casinos in Venice. So according to the Chidor, in the end he came around. After that, it seems like Gilgulim really kind of seeped in. As of today, it's very prevalent, very much even in the Litvische world, Gilgulim, and that's thanks to the Arizal and his Talmidim, and their Talmidim, who all talk about it literally to no end. There is a comment of the Rashash. The Rashash was a rabbi, maybe 150 years ago, and he wrote a great commentary on the Gemara, and it's not a number. It's just towards the top of the second page. You just have the name, the Rashash. There's no number there. The Rashash has a small comment, but it became famous, infamous, notorious. The Gemara says in Bava Metzia, the pasuk says in Kisava, Baruch atah b'vayecha, Baruch atah b'tzei secha. Benched are you when you arrive, benched are you when you leave. Says the Gemara, you know what that means? Just like when you entered Ma biyoschol elam, as you entered the world, it was without sin, so too when you leave the world, it should be without sin. So the Gemara is saying that when you are born without sin. You have a clean slate, your soul is clean. Frekter ashash mikan stirak tzas. There's a bit of a contradiction. Laba leidas hagilgul, to those that believe in Gilgul. It seems to be a powerful question. The Gemara says clearly you should leave the world without sin just like you came in. You came in with a clean slate. But the idea of Gilgul is you come to rectify a sin from the previous life. You're not coming with a clean slate. You're coming with strikes against you, and you're here to rectify it.
But you have to clarify then what do you mean by you? You mean you, the body, or you mean you, the soul? The soul can come back and rectify the sin that he did in the previous body. So now when he leaves it, finally, he leaves.
Okay, when he comes back, does he come back with a tarnished record? Are you saying the body starts off with a clean slate?
No, I'm saying the soul.
But the soul comes back with baggage.
No, 1 second. When the soul comes back, it comes back to rectify the previous sin.
But it's the
or-
same
or
soul.
mis-
But it's the same soul.
It's the same soul.
And it has a sin on its record.
It has a sin, but it recognizes it. So when he finally leaves, he leaves clean.
So then the Gemara should say that even if you came to this world with a sin, you should leave without a sin.
No, because he originally came without a sin.
You want to say the Gemara means just like the first time your soul came was without a sin.
Exactly. Your original
just like the first time you came.
You were placed the first time around with a clean slate.
So in other words, this on the contrary, the Gemara is talking about a Gilgul. We're telling the person, make sure you leave this time round with a clean soul, just like when it came the original time it came clean.
When you first came. Yeah?
You know what? I have to give that one to you, Shukayach. Very nice.
And anyway, this is a bracha.
No, but the Gemara's comment, what does it mean? Ma b'yaschab alechem? No, there is another answer. There is another answer, and that is that each time it's not the entire soul coming back. It's a portion, it's a chelik of the soul. It's like lighting a candle. So you can make more and more light from the same original light. There's a different, each time there's a different ray, there's a different ha'ara, a different spark. So this specific spark, it's first time being here. It's like one of the answers to if a soul lived numerous times, so when Mashiach comes, by Tchias HaMesim, which body? So there's a few, the Rebbe has a long letter about it in the second volume of Igris, but one of the answers is that each time there was a different bechina of the soul in that, it's all from the general soul, but each time was a different chelik, a different portion, and each portion will get up in the body that it lived in. So that particular portion, when it came to this world, it was b'loichet. So that's another answer. But al kol panim, this Rashash definitely stirred the pot, and no, it got many Talmudists thinking, hang on, maybe the view of the Talmudists is that Gilgul is incorrect. In other words, there's no clear marker, there's no clear source of Gilgul in Gemara. It's discussed by the Kabbalists. Okay, the Zohar. The Zohar talks about Gilgul. Fine. As is known, the story, the Maggid of Mezrich once asked the Baal Shem Tov, he said, Rebbe, the Zohar says, Ve'eila ha-mishpatim, these are the mishpatim, says the Zohar, this is the secrets of Gilgulim, of Gilgulaya. Eila ha-mishpatim, this is the secret behind Gilgulim. So the Maggid of Mezrich asked the Baal Shem Tov, what does that mean? So Baal Shem Tov told him to go to a forest and hide behind a certain tree and look. And he went there and he saw a fellow came. He was the wealthy person came. He sat down. He had his brunch, he got up and he left. But he left behind a sack of coins. A second guy walks by. He sees a sack of coins, takes it and goes. A third fellow, a poor man, Nebuch, he comes there, he's exhausted. He was by a river, so he drinks some water, he eats a bit, he goes to sleep. And all of a sudden he gets woken up. The first guy, the wealthy man, is there. What happened to the sack of coins? I don't know, I never saw it. Oh, he beat him up big time. He beat him up big time. So the Maggid came back like, how's that fair? The middle guy took the money, goes scot-free. The first guy lost his money, but then became a criminal for hitting the third guy for no reason. And the third guy got hit for no reason. Like, mazeh. So Baal Shem Tov said, all these three guys were here before. The first two fellows had a monetary issue between them. And really, the second guy deserved the money. They went to a judge. He was the third guy in the story. And the judge didn't even look into the case. He just said the first guy's potter.
He was crooked.
A crooked judge. Or he just was negligent, he didn't investigate. So the first guy had to give back the money. It was the exact same amount of money that was in that little purse. The second guy walked past and he took it. And the judge got his just desserts. So Hashem to the Eila Mishpatim, Dor Rosa of Gilgulaya, that Mishpatim is monetary judgments. In order for true monetary justice to be carried out, it's only with Gilgulim. Only then can it be truly carried out. Anyhow, so you have it in the Zohar. Another early sefer that pretty clearly mentions it is Sefer HaBohir, one of the earliest Sfarim of Kabbalah, which we link to Rab Nechunya ben Hakona. And there are 4 Sfarim which are linked to the Tana Rab Nechunya ben Hakona. One of them is Sefer HaBohir, another is Sefer HaKona, Sefer HaPliya, and Sefer HaTmuna. But in all of them, there's real discussion of who actually wrote it, etc. In Sefer HaBohir, it records a discussion between a Rebbe and his students, that the question is, why do you have a tzaddik v'ra'aloi and a rasha v'tovloi? You have great people who suffer and wicked people that prosper, right? The question Moshe Rabbeinu asked God, Ha'idiyeni no'ez d'rochecha, teach me your ways. Why is this happening? So the Sefer HaBohir records that the Rebbe told the students, it's because the guy looks like a tzaddik now. Yeah, but when he was younger, Lusha in the past, maybe he did something which needs rectification. That's why he's suffering. So the students asked, you're saying when he was younger? But the heavenly court doesn't punish someone for sins you do before 20. So the teacher says, I don't mean what he did before 20. I mean what he did in the past. Yeah. And he gives a mashal of someone who plants a seed and it doesn't work. It produces a wrong result, so he uproots it and replants it, gives it another try. It's a clear source for Gilgulim, and that the idea of Gilguls is the answer to Moshe Rabbeinu Shaila. Like the letter of the Rebbe we mentioned at the beginning of our discussion. So you have the Zohar, you have Sefer HaBohir. I mean, these are early Kabbalistic works, very early Kabbalistic works. But if you look in Gemara, you don't really see it. And then you have the Rashash saying it seems from the Gemara and Bava Metzia, against it. They asked the Rogatchover. Who asked the Rogatchover? The Kopist, the Rebbe of Kopist. The Mogen of us. He was the second Rebbe because his father was only a Rebbe for a short time before he passed away. But the Mogen of us. So the Rogatchover, was officially a chassid of his for some time. And the Mogen Ovis of Kopist allegedly asked the Rogatchover, where's the source for the idea of Gilgul? So the Rogatchover said it's Yerushalmi. Where? Number 9. It's Yerushalmi Masechta Avodah Zarah. The Yerushalmi is talking about food which are cooked by Goyim. Right? Bishul Akum. When is it a problem? Turmusin Shalahen Ma. What's the deal with turmusin? Turmusin is some type of a legume, lupine or something, some type of vegetable. So if the guy cooks it, you can't eat it raw. Can't be eaten raw. So if a guy cooks it, is it a problem? So it's really going into the issue of if it's now these vegetables are not fitting for shulchan malachim for a stately meal. So is it an issue or not? So Rebbe Oyser, Geneva matter. There's an Amora called Geneva. And he was matter. So Rebbe said, I'm old, and he's also old. We're both Zekanim. Ani Olas al Libi Leser, I thought it makes sense to Aser. V'hu Olas al Dai to Lahatir, and by him it made sense to be matter. So Rebbe's compromise said, listen, I can't knock off Geneva. He's just as prominent as I am. But he says we're both Zekanim. So the Rogatchover says, hang on a second. We have in Gemara numerous times, Geneva is alive in the times of Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, which is a couple generations after Rebbe. How was he an old man in the times of Rebbe? If he's still living 3 generations later, his peers with Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, a teacher, peer with Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, 3 generations later, he's an old man. What it means is, Rebbe meant this guy is an old soul. He's an old because if you take the years of his previous life, he really wasn't that old in this lifetime. He was a young man. But he's a lot of experience because of his previous lifetime. That was the Rogatchover's Raya. They say the Rogatchover didn't spend too much time by the Mogen Ovis of Kopist because the Mogen Ovis once said a mimer, and the Rogatchover heard something that he felt was against something in the Yerushalmi, and that was it. He left, and The truth is, there are a few statements in Gemara that seem to indicate, there's a Yerushalmi that says, Rabbi Doisa ben Harkina said, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's eyes are like the eyes of Ezra. The Kabbalists take that to mean Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who was 10th generation from Ezra. That the Gemara says in Brachos. But Yerushalmi means he was a Gilgul of Ezra. The eyes are the gateway to the soul. So, or else, the Yerushalmi says his eyes were the eyes of Ezra. It's random. No, what it means is that his soul was the soul of Ezra. Or like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, I am like 70 years old. Well, he was 18. So the Arizal says he was a Gilgul of Shmuel. The 52 years of Shmuel, 18. So it's another hint. There's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Gemara says, Yeravam ben Nevat, his father Nevat, is the same guy as Sheva ben Bichri, who led a revolution against David. And both of them are the same guy as Micha, who had a shrine in Sefer Shoftim, a shrine in the times of the Mishkan, a shrine for idol worship. Same guy. The Maharsha says, Micha is from Ephraim, so is Yeravim, and Nevat. Sheva ben Bichri is from Binyamin. Right? The Yad Rameh asks, why would the Eibush allow a Rasha like that to live for so long? Micha left Egypt. So others say, no, when the Gemara said it's the same person, it doesn't literally mean the same person. They're different bodies, they're from different Shvatim. They lived centuries apart from each other. Micha was alive when they left Egypt. What it means is they have the same soul. So that would be another place where the Gemara is hinting. The Gemara says in Megillah, Memuchan, who advises Haman to kill Vashti, who advises Achashverosh, Memuchan zeh Haman, he is Haman. So the Maharal asks, the Midrashim on the Megillah all say that all of the advisors that advised Achashverosh to kill Vashti were promptly executed. Memuchan was killed. How could he be Haman? Says the Maharal, the Gemara doesn't mean it's the same person. It means their souls come from the same root, which is similar to the idea of incarnation. So there are many hints in Gemara about this. It's why isn't it Mefurish? It's like many Kabbalistic secrets. There's Nigla and there's Nister, The Agadot of Gemara encapsulates in it many deep Kabbalistic, ideas, Musar ideas. So many ideas were not spoken openly. So Gilgul is one of those ideas that was only hinted to. And we've given a couple examples of where it's hinted to. Comes, oh my, okay. Thank you for your patience. Comes now. In number 11, the Arizal says the truth is, there's a couple psukim in Tanakh. Clearly indicate. You ever heard of the pasuk, Dor hoylech v'dor bav ha'aretz la'elam ha'medus and kahelis? What does it mean a generation goes and a generation comes? It's the same generation. It's the same generation. Dor hoylech and dor bav is the same generation. The souls leave and the same souls come back. That's what it means. The same people that left, the souls come back. What does it mean the world stands still? He says only men come back, not women. That's right. That's right. A generation goes and comes, that's men. Women are the earth. Like when a woman is karka, a woman is land, like legally. She's still, because she's passive and still. But even in Kabbalah, a woman is Malchus, and Malchus is like the Oretz. But either way, he says women, they don't come back in Gilgul. And he gives a reason why. He says, you know why? Because the Gemara says in Chagiga, Torah is a shield protecting a person from the fire of Gehenna. Only men are chayiv in learning Torah, and they learn. Women aren't chayiv. So even if they do learn, they don't get the same protection. So a man can't go to Gehenna. B'ikaron, in some... So therefore, the other option is you need rectification. Head back down to planet Earth. But the woman gets to go to Gehenna because she doesn't have that shield of Torah. Now it's better for her because we saw from the Reishis Chachma that Gehenna is the better of the two options. By the way, if you want a little bit of lumdus, the Gemara says in Eidavin, Avraham Avinu stands at the entrance of Gehenna, and any Jew who has a bris milah, right, and didn't live with a Goyish woman, etc., he doesn't let them enter Gehenna. So Nebuch, if you have a stain on your soul, the other option is Gilgul. The question is Avram Avinu protecting the women? They don't have a bris. But the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah, Isha kaman demal yadamya. A woman is like she has a bris. As far as what halacha? The Gemara there says that it could be only one who has a bris is kosher to give somebody else a bris. But according to one opinion, a woman's still allowed to give a bris because it's like she has. Isha kaman demal. It's like she has a bris. And she learns from Tzipora. The Gemara says, though, there's other ways of learning the story of Tzipora. But yeah, the simple reading is she did it herself. Right, she did it herself. And so the question is, what does it mean a woman is like she has a bris? And mamish means she has a bris. So it could depend. The Rogatchover wants to know, when it comes to a bris, there's three parts of the mitzvah. There's the actual activity of cutting. Then there's the result, but there's two results. There's the positive result that you have a milah, you're circumcised, and you also have the shlila that you no longer have a foreskin. So the Rogat shows that both of these are true. They're true. They're truths, each to their own. Which box can the woman check? The action of cutting, for sure not. She can definitely check the box, I don't have the foreskin. Like if the main part of the milah is not there, she has no foreskin. But if it's to be circumcised, it's hard to say that she has that positive aspect. So there's a shaila, when the Gemara says Avram Avinu prevents women from prevents people who have a bris from entering, would it include women or not? If it doesn't include women, so that would be another explanation of why they get an entry pass into Gehenna, whereas men are barred, and therefore the only other option is Gilgul. But he learns from the pasuk Dur Hoylech v'Dur Ba. There's a pasuk in Eve that Arizal learns it from. Hein kol eile yifal kel pamayim v'shalashim gover. The Eibishter works it over with a man 2 times, 3 times. The Arizal says that means God brings you back 2 times, 3 times in gover with a man. Another indication is for the men, not for the women. But these are psukim in Tanakh that the Arizal said. This is what the pasuk is telling you. It's telling you. You just have to have the right glasses to read it. Now, very, very quickly, we've finished the end of the sources. This was all the introduction. There's no more sources. My friends, we're done. But we've got to plug it in to... Oh, sorry. 12. The Arizal... Okay. Hold on. So, the Arizal wrote nothing, right? Reb Chaim Vital is where we have almost all of our information from. Not everything, but the vast majority. So you have the 8 gates, the Shmoyne Sha'arim, part of the Kisvei of Reb Chaim Vital. And one of them is the Shar HaGilgulim, the gate of reincarnation. There's another book called Sefer HaGilgulim. It's a different book, which was written based on later manuscripts writings that they have from Reb Chaim Vital. There's a lot of overlapping, but not everything's the same. In Shara Gilgulim, this is in, it says like this. Be'inyan Gilgul Neshamas. The Arizal said, B'chlal, why does it happen? Why are you misgalgal? He said, you should know, the Neshama could be misgalgal for one of many reasons. The first one is, if someone violated a certain Aveira, got to rectify it. He comes to fix it. He comes to rectify. That's the most classic. Especially we saw it's like in lieu of Gehenna. So it means to rectify where we messed up, and God gives us a chance to make it right. Habez, we happen to miss out on a positive mitzvah opportunity. Hashlishis, right, we saw both of them in the Charedim, exactly. The third reason is, we come to help somebody else. The only reason the soul came back, and that could be what the Baal Shem Tov said, that sometimes a soul is alive 70, 80 years just to do a favor for another Yid. So people ask on the Baal Shem Tov, what do you mean? How could you say that's why you're alive? You're alive to be a Jew, to serve God. But you see from this Harizal, no. Of course, when you're alive, you have to serve the Eibush every moment. But it could be the reason that you came back was just for that one favor you could do. Fascinating.
That's the most interesting anyway.
Now, he says like this. If you're from the first reason, You're Korach lachet. It's very easy to slip up again. Because you slipped up last time. What's the assurance? If you're in the second category, that you're not coming because you slipped up. You're coming to make the most of an opportunity that you didn't make last time. So then, rochik michet. The third category, it's almost guaranteed you won't sin. You're here for somebody else. And then he says there's other reasons. Sometimes a person comes into a Gilgul because last time round you didn't marry your correct wife. You got to come back to... This is an Akdama Ches, when he writes some fascinating things. But Akopanim, there's a story happened not to... This is going to mama shake the... This happened not too long ago in France. I don't know the exact year, but it's been publicized, where somebody had a mikveh, made a mikveh right next to their house. Why? Because the other kosher mikveh was far away, it was hard to get there, and this person put in a lot of energy, money, arranging to make a mikveh. And he made it very safe. No kids should be going in and out, very safe. Somehow, one of his own kids ended up entering in the mikveh. Yeah. And he couldn't understand, why would they do this to me? Why, how does that... So, he went around to different rabbis, asked them this, that. He didn't get any satisfactory answer. This is something you need the Rebbe for. If you don't, only the Rebbe can give you the true answer, the answer. But one night he had a dream. His child. He's told in his dream that the soul of the child had lived in France 800 years ago, was one of the Baalei Tesis, part of the schools of the Baalei Tesis. And he was killed in one of the massacres. So I don't know what year it was, it could have been one of many. It could have been one of many massacres, could in France, maybe in southern Germany, one of the massacres. And when he went to Gan Eden, the Baalei Tesis, Tzadikim, they was killed for being a Yid, but there was one heichel, one chamber he wanted to enter. And they told him you can't enter, because your body didn't have a tara. Before a Jew's buried, the body gets a tara, right? But that didn't happen to those that were killed in the massacres. Lucky if he got a Jewish burial. Didn't have a tara. Who knows what happened? Maybe his body was burnt. Who knows? God forbid. Didn't have a tara. So he couldn't enter a certain chamber. So he chose to be able to come back and live a couple years here and get that tara. And that's what happened. Died in the mikveh. That was the tara. Ouch. Okay. Anyhow.
Jacob Snyder.
What?
Jacob Snyder. Yeah.
So how does it all tie into Korach? So I'm just going to do this very, very quick, because we've got to leave something on the parsha. The Arizal discusses the following in a few of his Sforim. Reb Chaim Vital's writing it down, the Shara Psukim and some of the other Sforim, that when Cain killed Hevel, it set off a major chain of events. You know why Cain killed Hevel? In Medrash Rabbah, there's a few opinions. One opinion is they were fighting over a woman. How so? So the Medrash Rabbah says Cain was born with a twin sister. Hevel was born two twin sisters. So both of them get one of the women. The shaila is who gets the extra girl. So Hevel said, she's born with me. Cain, yeah, but I'm the Bechor. So they fought about it until Cain killed her. As I state in Medrash Rabbah, it's one of the opinions of what the fight was. I'm sorry, Cain killed him. So Cain killed him, yeah. So says the Arizal, what did Hashem say about Cain's future? Cain was worried, anyone who sees me will kill me. So Hashem says, Shivasayim yukam koyin. Shivasayim in 7 generations. Yukam koyin. Cain will, the vengeance will be taken against Cain. Cain Taka died, 7 generations later. But says the Arizal, Yukam is a Rosh Tevis. The 3 letters stand for something. Cain came back 3 times. Yukam stands for 3 people that were actually all alive at the same time. The Yud stands for Yisrael. The Kuf is Korach. The Mem is the Mitzri. Which Mitzri? The Mitzri in Parsha Shmos that Moshe kills. They were all alive at the same time. He says they were all different parts of Cain's soul. The Nefesh of Cain, which was the lowest, that came into the Goy, the Mitzri. The Ruach of Cain comes into Korach. What? And the Neshama is Yisrael. Hevel comes back as well, as Moshe. Now this is something spoken about in many cabalistic Sfarim, that Moshe is Rosh Tevis. Moshe, Sheis, Hevel. When Chava gave birth to Sheis, she said, the Eibusha gave me a child in place of his brother. Literally hinting to the fact that Sheis it was in place of his brother Hevel. Hevel came back into Sheis, and then the soul comes back as Moshe. So Moshe is Rosh Tevis, the Mem is Moshe, the Shin is Sheis, the He is Hevel. Moshe was a shepherd. Moshe Hoyeroy is a shepherd. Why is he a shepherd? Hevel was a shepherd. In fact, one opinion in Medrash Rabbah is Hevel owned all of the livestock, and Cain owned all the real estate. And Cain told Hevel, get off my field. That's how the fight started. But that's why Hevel's korban was from sheep, animals. Cain was from vegetation. Hevel was a shepherd, as was Moshe. So the Arizal says Moshe is going to take vengeance, but he's going to rectify Cain. The Mitzri, Yisrael, Korach. And if you notice, just like when Cain killed Hevel, it was over an extra woman. Each time Hevel encounters Cain in their next lives, there's a woman involved. How so? When Moshe kills the Mitzri, what was the story? This Mitzri was interested in a woman, Shloimis Bas Divri, who was married to Dosan. And he ended up being with her at night. In the middle of the night, he removed Dosan from the house. He cohabited with the woman. She conceived a baby from that. The next day, when the Mitzri realized that Dosan knew that Mitzri had been with his wife, the Mitzri was beating up Dosan. And Moshe sees. And Moshe kills the Mitzri. Why? He turned this way, he turned that way. Rashi quotes from the Medrash. What does it mean he turned this way and that way? He saw what the Mitzri had done in the house with Dosan's wife. He saw what the Mitzri is doing now, beating up Dosan. So simply that means that Moshe killed the Mitzri over the Mitzri overstepping his boundary, taking a woman that wasn't his. Just like Cain killed Hevel, taking a woman that wasn't for him, it really belonged to Hevel. So too, Moshe killed the Mitzri, who has the nefesh of Cain, because the Mitzri, Cain again, is violating, overstepping his boundaries, going to the forbidden zone, taking a woman that doesn't belong to him. But you know what the Chidah says? When the Medrash says he saw what the Mitzri did in the house, he saw what he did in the field. You know what it means in the house is what he did with the wife. You know what it means what he saw the Mitzri do in the field? When Cain killed Hevel in the field. It says they were in the field in Parshas Bereshis. That's what it refers to. Exactly. So Moshe was, when Cain killed Hevel, he left his blood sprawled across the Eitzim and Avonim. When Moshe kills the Mitzri, Vaitmenei B'chol, he covers him. He buries him. And how does he kill him? Well, in Medrash, there's a few opinions, but the main opinion is he used the Shem HaMeforish. That's what Rashi says, right? When someone dies by hearing the explicit name of God, it's a tremendous rectification for the soul. Moshe was not doing vengeance. He was not committing nakama. He was rectifying the soul of Cain. That was Mitzri. We'll get to Korach in a minute. When it comes to Yisro, Yisro's name was originally Yeser, and then it became Yisro. He got an extra vav. Where did it come from? Vayosem Hashem leKayin ois, the Eibishter gave Cain a sign. What was the sign God put on Cain's forehead when he was afraid? Kol moitzi arguni, whoever finds me will kill me. So this, the Mefarshim discuss many explanations. What was the sign? But the Targum Yonason says, the Eibishter gave him a letter from his name. God's name is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Which letter of Hashem's name did he put on Cain's forehead? Says the Arizal was the Vav. Cain always had an extra Vav with him. So that's why when Yisro was Zoicha to go from Yesher to Yisro, he got that Vav. He got that Vav. It was already given to him in his previous life. When Yisro comes to Moshe, in the beginning of Parshas Yisro, he says, your Shver have behold, your Shver have come to greet you. And your wife is here, and your 2 sons. I'm here, and what does Rashi say over there? Ich bin da. If I'm not good enough, your wife Sapphira is here. If she's not good enough, your kids Gershom and Eliezer are here. You know what that Arizal says? And a number of Mukabalim say this. What he meant to say is, I'm Cain, we're old brothers. You may not be so excited to see me. So guess who I have with me? Sapphira. You know what Sapphira is? She was a Gilgul of that extra twin that Hevel had. So Yisro says, last time round I took her. I'm giving her back. I'm doing I stole your wife last time. Here she is, your Hevel. Here's your wife. And if you don't want to come out for her, come out for your kids. You know what these kids are? The kids that Hevel never had. Hashem told Cain, the voice of the bloods, Kol Dmei Achicha, are crying to me. What does the Gemara say in Sanhedrin? Rashi quotes in Chumash. The blood of the children that Hevel never had were crying out to God. Those are the kids that Yisro tells Moshe, I have with them. Those kids that you never had, they're here now. They're here now. Cain said, when he killed Hevel, he said, Leis din, v'leis dayin, there's no judge, there's no judgment. Life is a free-for-all. So how does Yisro rectify that? He said there's no dayin, there's no God in heaven. He says, now I know, Ati Adaiti. What does he say in Yisro? Now I know God is the greatest. He said there's no judgment. He sets up a whole system of judges in Parshas Yisro. Now you come to Korach. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin that Korach spread a rumor around the camp. Moshe is not to be trusted with women. Moshe is a playboy. He's not to be trusted, and he made sure everyone warned their wives, don't hang out with Moshe. We learn it because it says, Vayekanu l'Moshe b'machin and Tehillim. They were makana, which could mean to warn your wife. Stay away from that guy. I don't trust you with him. I don't trust him. It's bad news. So everyone asks, how could Korach spread such a rumor? How could it even take root? So we have a shir that the Baal Shem Tov said is because Moshe from birth was born with potential to have a big Yetzer Hara. Now he vanquished it, but because he had that in potential, so a rumor was able to spread around later in life. But in some this I don't think that Arizal says, but some Sfarim say it's continuing the same theme. Each time Cain and Hevel come together, there's a woman in between. There's the woman that's causing the rift. And here was Korach felt, unbeknownst, didn't know why. He felt Moshe was coming to take his wife. He's holding on to what he fears he may lose. Now what happens to Korach? He goes underground. The same way that ultimately Hevel's blood seeped into the ground, and in Parashas Bereshit the ground was cursed. The ground was cursed in Parashas Bereshit for ultimately absorbing the blood of Hevel. So the ground needed rectification. The ground also had a Gilgul. The ground also had to rectify itself. How? By this time swallowing up Cain. So it's just fascinating that when you have the glasses of the Adiz of Gilgulim, it breathes a whole new light. It explains why Korach had this whole fight with Moshe. What a talus, a room full of Sfarim. It was much deeper than that. Korach, he has part of the soul of Cain. Him and Moshe are head to head. They have this. It's in them. It's in them. It's in them from day one. In fact, the Kabbalists say so to Yosef and his brothers. Yosef is sourced in Cain, and Yehuda is sourced in Hevel. That's why Yehuda was a shepherd, and that's why Yosef is busy gathering grain, just like Cain himself was agriculture. And the same, there's an underlying animosity, enmity, or friction, a discord, all from the original sin of Cain and Hevel, and it just keeps on playing out. But every time they come together, the fight doesn't continue. There's a rectification that happens. Ultimately, Yehuda and Yosef make peace, and ultimately, the Mitzri Moshe rectifies his soul by saying the name of Hashem, by burying him. And ultimately, Korach buried in the ground. That was Taka. He had to have that to rectify him. And Yisro, which was the highest part, was the neshama of Cain. There, no one had to die. There, they were father-in-law, son-in-law, and there was somewhat of a complete rectification. It didn't end there. Still, there's later stories continuing. But Al Kapanim, he gives a whole new appreciation when you learn stories of Tanakh with the glasses of the Arizal. Okay, we'll end over here.